She was writing docudramas before the theater had a genre for them. She graduated from Harvard before it had a theater program. And a month after she became artistic director of the McCarter Theatre in 1990, New Jersey cut its arts budget in half. Welcome to Women in Theater. I'm Linda Weiner, theater critic of Newsday, and our guest is Emily Mann, playwright, director, artistic director of the Tony Award-winning McCarter Theatre, and one of the few women, make that one of the few artists, who found a place for political theater on Broadway. So if I were to wake you up in the middle of the night and say, what's your career? Would you say playwright, director, artistic director?
Such a good question, and I have heard it many times, and I finally come to realize that I feel I'm a director when I'm directing, and I'm a writer when I'm writing, and an artistic director when I'm doing that. But basically, I make theater. Just make theater, hopefully good theater.
But it's so unusual to have somebody who does all three.
It's very unusual.
Yeah.
In fact, the only one I can think of who was doing that in this country is George Wolfe.
Yeah.
And then he felt he had to stop being an artistic director to be going back to being a writer,
Yeah.
which I understand. But I've just finished writing a new play, and I'm hoping I can keep all three balls in the air.
And what's it about? Can we say?
I don't want to.
You don't want to talk about it? Oh yeah.
It's just the first draft is done.
Okay.
So
Well then, never mind.
soon,
Never mind.
soon I'll tell you about it.
Okay. When I was going through the list of all these amazing things that happened to you, I'm thinking, wait a minute, she's the wrong generation to have been a pioneer. You know, our pioneering women in the theater were right before us. So, do you actually think that you were struggling through all of that when it was going on?
Oh, I'm so sad to say I do. Because as wonderful as Nina Vans and Zelda and our great generation of women before us, that they pioneered the not-for-profit theater movement in this country and all of those good things, I was still the first woman to ever direct on the Guthrie main stage, which is where I apprenticed. I was the first woman to direct on just about every stage I was on in the 70s and 80s, and sometimes into the early 90s.
It's pathetic.
It's pathetic. Thank you. Yes, and so we all, my crowd still has, all the wounds somewhat healed, but we went through the wars too. And we're still going through them. It's just, it's so much better now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It is, and yet
the numbers are still terrible. I mean, if
Yes.
you're looking at them.
Right. Let's not do
Let's
numbers.
not
It's
go
too
there.
sad. It's
Thank
too
you.
sad.
Good.
So when you were at Harvard, did someone actually say women can't direct? Why don't you think about children's theater?
Oh, did you've heard me say this before. Yes, in fact, he really did.
Wow.
And I think one of the blessings is that I came from a household where my father was an early feminist, and he taught at Smith College because he believed in the education of women, and he actually brought me up to believe that women can do whatever they want to do. So when I was told that women can't do whatever they want to do, it was really too late, and I decided I would do it anyway. And so, and sort of with a renewed, what is the word I'm searching for? Renewed energy. Because when people tell me no, I usually want to do it. And so I was angry enough to make the leap.
You came from a really
Oh.
wonderful looking family.
Oh, yeah.
Your father then was a
American historian.
American historian at the University of Chicago.
He started out at Smith, so when I was a little girl until I was 13, I was in Northampton, Massachusetts, and then he moved to Chicago in '66. So I went to high school in Chicago.
Went to the lab school.
I did. One of the great schools of all
on the
time.
On the north side, we little girls used to envy the little girls on the south side going to the lab school.
Really?
Sure.
Oh, my.
Well, sure. I mean, I think people outside Chicago think about Chicago as a university town. Oh, do you go to the university there, without realizing University of Chicago is its own little world on the south side.
Yeah, absolutely.
But incredibly diverse.
Incredibly diverse, and it really formed me. It formed me in almost every way. To be in that community between 1966 and 1970, we lived 2 blocks away from Elijah Muhammad, the head of the Black Muslim Party, and then the Black Panther Party was there, and SDS was there, and the Days of Rage, and so all the questions of the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement were all coming together at one time as I was coming of age. So to be in that community where it was right around us was very exciting. It woke me up. politicized me, actually.
Yeah.
How could it not?
How good. Well, that I was looking at the place, the testimony theater, you call it, right? Testament
Theater of testimony.
Theater of testimony. Basically drawn from court documents and interviews.
Right, and oral histories.
Yeah, and you were doing this, as I said before every other play we see now is.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, because one of them, Still Life, was about Vietnam vets. And then, of course, Execution of, and you're not a Vietnam vet. And then Execution of Justice was about the Harvey Milk assassination and everything in San Francisco, and you're not a gay guy. And, and then Having Our Say is about the Delaney sisters, and you're not a black woman. So why you?
Why me? It's a very good question. I don't know. I've talked to a lot of other people in the theater about what they write about, and I think Ethel Fugard said it best. He said, "There's no set of people that I cannot speak about. The only thing that will keep me from doing something is the lack of my theatrical imagination." And I always took that to heart. And also, I guess, because I was brought up by two historians, my father and a brilliant historian, John Hope Franklin, African-American historian. In fact, we were with him the night, the day that Martin Luther King was killed.
Was your father on the march to Montgomery?
The Selma to Montgomery march with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yes.
But what was so interesting about all of that is that, if you open your heart and you listen, you can see yourself in all humanity. And so saying you can't write about men because you're not a man, or you can't write about black people because you're not black, or you can only write about what a Jewish woman who was born in Chicago, or was born in Massachusetts and moved to Chicago. I mean, how narrow are you going to get? And so early on, I just never allowed those barriers to stop me.
Your first play, Anula, was actually about a Holocaust survivor.
Yes.
So when you started, at least there was something that came out of.
Yes, something that came out of something that meant a lot
that
to me
people
from
can
a
identify.
heritage, right?
That's all.
Yes, I'm a Jew, and Anula was a Jew. Yeah.
We could do the simple
We
connection.
could do the simple connection,
Okay.
right. But in fact, once I could understand Anula, I very much understood Bessie Delaney.
Bessie Delaney, one of the two
One of the two
175-year-old sisters
Exactly.
from Having Our Say.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's a kind of empathy, I think, for every artist, and this the question is, if you can put yourself in the shoes of another human being, then I think that's really what makes you an artist or not an artist.
You wrote a screenplay about Winnie Mandela.
Yeah.
And that was Camille Cosby.
Yes.
Now, how do you know the Cosbys? How did they come to you to say? How did
Yeah.
she come to you to say?
Well, that's an
I want you to
interesting
do
story.
Winnie Mandela.
Camille decided she wanted to write, to produce a movie about the life of Winnie, and they were looking for who the writer should be, and it was going to be a miniseries for television. And her partner was a woman named Judith Rutherford James, and I knew Judy James from the Mark Taper Forum in Los Angeles, where my play Still Life about the Vietnam vet had been, and she adored it. And of course, first they were looking for black writers, male or female, to do this. And interestingly enough, she found that a lot of the black male writers that Camille spoke to, she didn't have the right kind of empathy for women, and also had a sense that they understood Africa because they were black, and she felt that, of course, they didn't. And then the women weren't able to get network approval. And so Judy said, well, what about my friend Emily Mann? She does a lot of work with black artists, and she grew up with an enormous amount of contact with African American community and the African community in Chicago, and the man was like her second father is John Hope Franklin, and Camille went, oh my. So we met and we talked, and I said, I think you should get a black writer, and she said, we're striking out on that. My gut tells me you're right, and off we went.
And off you went.
And then she, of course, became those two produced Having Our Say on Broadway.
Yes. Now, how did you go from being a freelance director and playwright, basically known in regional theaters, but not the boss?
Yeah.
Were you surprised when they came to you to ask you to run the McCarter?
Not at all. In fact,
what you wanted?
Well, no, neither. First, I was always someone who had a lot to say at all these, not-for-profit meetings, and I sort of mouthed off. And finally, and then people would call me and say, well, put your money where your mouth is. You say how theater should be run. Why don't you run one? And I would say, no, 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 I'm a writer and director, and I won't be able to do both and run a theater.
And raise a child.
And raise a child.
Okay,
and that's finally what did it. Once I was divorced from Nick's dad, I had to...
Actor Jerry Bauman.
Jerry Bauman, yeah. I had to then find a way to do my work and be in one spot. I mean, one of us had to be in one place, I thought, to bring up our son Will. And so then I suddenly thought, well, what about artistic direction? And I heard about the McCarter being up for grabs for the artistic head, and I called the headhunter, and he said, oh, finally, oh, good. And he got me an interview, and the rest is history. It just seemed right, and it was a college town.
That's what I was thinking, college town, you know, University of Chicago, really college town, here college town.
Yes.
How much of your audience is from the university? Or
Well,
do
you know, I don't
really
actually know the numbers, but it's not that large, because it's a town of 40,000, and, you know, we have 200,000 people come to the theater every year. And our subscription base is 12 to 15,000, so you can see we really go from all around the counties and in New Jersey. Around, I think it's 5 counties, plus Bucks County in Pennsylvania, and some people actually come up from Philadelphia, and we actually have subscribers from New York, which I love.
That's delightful.
Course. Yeah,
that's delightful. And in these times, how did you manage to build a new theater?
Oh, well,
sorry.
It's not as easy as it looks, but
the brief answer to that, I'm afraid.
The brief answer is the wonderful Roger Berlind.
Yes, producer,
and the wonderful Princeton University. So that we three, the McCarter, the university, and Roger, all gave 1/3 to build it. And Roger felt, because he's an a very eminent alum of Princeton, that this was the moment for the university to take a big step forward in the arts, because he loved what I was doing at McCarter and what McCarter had become. So it was a perfect marriage, and we have this beautiful theater. And in fact, we opened it with Anna in the Tropics by Nilo Cruz.
Nilo Cruz, you had actually been nurturing him for 10 years. People, after he won the Pulitzer Prize, people said, Nilo who? And this is somebody that you had been working with all those years.
All those years. And so we thought it would be absolutely appropriate to open the new theater with a play of Nilo's, and I fell in love with Anna. It's one that we didn't commission. We commissioned many from Nilo, and I wanted to direct it. And then we found out that it won the Pulitzer, which was very interesting. And then Roger said, well, why don't I be the producer that brings this beautiful play to Broadway? So that was a kind of blessed opening of a theater.
And Jimmy Smits. We both came to the Jimmy Smits moment at the same time. In that white suit.
Oh, please. In that white suit.
In that white suit. You have directed a lot of plays that I tend to identify you with socially conscious theater.
Yeah. You know, do you think it's because of my writing?
I think it's because of your writing, really.
Yeah.
Because those are really most often the plays that get here, too, are the ones that you've written and then directed.
Yes.
And so I look back now, you've just directed a absolutely fantastic, deliriously edgy production of Christopher Durang's Miss Witherspoon. We're talking now in December of 2005. It's been extended, and I hope it, is going to run for a long time.
Thank you.
Where did you and Christopher? I sort of went, Christopher Durang, Emily Mann.
I know, and in fact, it's such a great marriage, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've known each other since Harvard as undergraduates. We were both in a playwriting seminar of this wonderful man, William Alfred, who wrote Hogan's Goat, among other things, a great classicist. And I was a freshman, and Chris was a senior, and William Alfred loved the two of us, and I absolutely worshipped Chris and watched his career from that moment on, and he was very dear and supportive of my playwriting as well. So we've kept in touch over the years, but then he moved to Bucks County.
So diverse, though.
I know. But the thing about Chris's work that makes us very good for each other is not only does he just make me giggle, and he is just one of the funniest men alive, and I love how he makes me laugh, he's actually talking often about very, very important things, and his humor works best as Christine Nielsen, who is just a genius, a comic genius.
She is Miss Witherspoon in the play, yes.
She is wonderful. Is that the more painful and the more real you find the moments and you find the story, the funnier it is with a Chris Durang play, which is true of great comic writers. Yes, so I often am known for finding the comedy in tragedy, but it was so much fun to find the comedy or the tragedy in comedy and have the same sort of wild humor work on a deep level.
Yeah, because there's a real warmth in it and such edge.
Yeah, good.
Also, during Edward Alby's supposed exile, or self-exile, or whatever, from the New York Theater,
yes,
you did find this wonderful play from 1971 called All Over, which is a Death Watch drama that was just, a footnote. People said, this failed, and let's not pay any attention to it. You brought it into New York. It was a fantastic play. Very, very unflinchingly.
Beautiful play. It's the companion piece to Seascape.
Yes, I do, yes.
I mean, it's two sides of the same coin.
Yes. Could you talk a little bit about how you came to that?
To All Over?
Yeah.
Well, earlier, in fact, as soon as I got the job as artistic director at McCarter, I called Edward Alby and said, will you give me a play, and will you come here, and what can I do? And it's interesting because it was about the same time he gave Three Tall Women to Larry Sakharov. He gave me Marriage Play. And we did Marriage Play, and he directed it, and it was a great experience together. And then I just remembered a play that I had read in graduate school that I thought was the most brilliant play about death I'd ever, and life, really, I'd ever read, but didn't feel mature enough to do it justice. And I went back and read it, and having gone through the losses I've gone through, suddenly it just made utter sense. And I called him and said, would you let me do this? And he said, well, of course. So I did, and he was part of the whole thing. And Rosemary Harris
as the wife, and Michael Learned as the mistress, both of them waiting there for the man to die.
Yeah.
Such a bold play.
Yes, such a bold play. And two Alby women. Yes. Both have done so much work with Edward, and always admired each other and never worked together. So it was an amazing, another magical event. Yeah.
You have worked with a lot of actors early, before we knew who Linda Hunt was.
Yes.
You had Linda Hunt.
That's right. That's true.
Before John Spencer was on West Wing, you had John Spencer.
Absolutely.
You've got
Franny McDormand.
Yes,
I have
and
a
Three
good,
Sisters.
Good track record with this.
So you have a good eye, huh?
Oh, thank you. I think so. If you look at I love photos, and I have them framed all over my house, and so all these old production shots and, opening night smooching shots, and they're all over the house, and they're all now very famous people who weren't necessarily famous when the picture was taken.
There's a lot of talk about national theater, no national theater. Do we need a national theater? Is it redundant? Is it, Where's your position on that one?
I'm pretty clear on that. I think the real national theater is the not-for-profit theater movement, which is all over this country and also in New York. And that's where the serious theater is being done. It's so sad because there's so many commercial producers who have their hearts in the right places, but the numbers are so difficult right now, and the economy is so difficult that I think without the not-for-profit theaters, the serious American theater would die. So
and
that's our national theater.
I totally agree, but there was some movement to try to get it centralized again.
Yes, and I'm very supportive of that endeavor of trying to get a theater called the National Theater in New York, doing the theater from around the country and in New York, and showcasing it. I think there's room for that, but would not be the National Theater. It would be a place where much of the National Theater gets seen in New York.
Yeah, but I often think Broadway really is the showcase. That for things that work other places, then eventually they get here. But maybe I'm being a little rosy.
I think you're being a little rosy. I think that maybe a couple of years, maybe out of date and maybe not. I know that when Anne in the Tropics died, oh my God, ended on Broadway, ended its run on Broadway.
It is like a death, right? When they close.
It is. Yes. What a slip. He said, well, I don't know if I'll ever be able to produced another serious American play on Broadway, a new American play on Broadway. And I think there are many producers who feel that way. And then after Gem of the Ocean closed early for August Wilson's play, I just got so upset. I said, well, and I called August and said, can we continue it, continue the life of the play? And he was thrilled, and we just did that this past fall at McCarter. But often I think the best of our new work and the most cutting edge of our classical work is often not seen in New York. And that's the sadness. And I wish it were, but it often isn't. And I would love to see if in the next 5 to 10 years whether we can turn it around in any way, because I don't think that Broadway can sustain with the serious American drama. Although the not-for-profits that have the Broadway designation are perhaps going to save the day with Lincoln Center, Manhattan Theatre Club, roundabout.
Yeah. What's gone wrong?
What's gone wrong?
3 minutes or less.
Oh,
yes.
boy.
What happened?
I don't know. I think that the economy of the street is just not working now for serious drama. The press doesn't seem to know that part of the job is to champion what's great in the American theater and help give it life rather than killing it along the way. And
yes, but I would say the artists probably have been saying that
from time immemorial.
You know, so I doubt that that's any different. You know.
Well, I don't know.
We probably all think press always thinks that we are
it.
supporting, and the artists always think we're not. So I think probably that's forever
true. But I don't think that, as I remember Peter Hall saying to me, it's so crazy, you Americans, that you can work for years on something and then it's one review that often tells the tale, and that's not true in Europe, and that's not true in the old New York. You know, if you're looking back early in the 40s, I mean, that wasn't actually true. And Arthur Miller, before he died, you know, he would rail about this all the time, saying, well, you need a consortium. And I think that's true. So I think it's a complicated problem. I think it's always been complicated. People have been talking about the death of theater from time immemorial, and I don't think it's ever going to die. People need to tell their stories live, and I believe we're all making it happen.
What about women playwrights? You know, I think that there's really been an amazing growth in African American women playwrights right now.
Yes.
But there doesn't seem to be the place for other kinds of women's plays. Am I wrong?
Oh boy, I don't know where to begin with that either. I don't know how to talk about this without getting very emotional. Let's see.
This is our Barbara Walters moment.
I was going to say,
good.
oh, good, yes.
Yeah.
I think women are writing extraordinary plays, and they are being recognized more than they ever have been in the past. And yet, they're not necessarily having the kind of international spotlight that they should be having. I'm not exactly sure why that's true, but I think it is true. And I also think that that will change. I'm going to live to see that change. I'm very optimistic about it, because I think many of the women writing right now are the voice of sanity in a very insane time. And I think we're all hungry to hear from them. So we're hearing from them around the country, and soon we'll be hearing from them in New York more consistently. And once you hear from them more in New York more consistently, then nationally they're championed, and internationally they're also produced. So
but
it
you
will
know, there were times when I was writing about, look at all these women playwrights, and when, you know, when they were winning Pulitzer Prizes, and they were all there,
God
and now
you.
Where are they? And anyway, that's too sad.
I know, but I don't have an answer.
That is too sad.
I don't have an answer.
So did our town actually open at your theater?
Yes, it did.
My God, and did Jimmy Stewart used to work there?
He certainly did. Yes, indeed.
So do even though you have a new theater, do the walls talk to you?
They do. It's really the most magical place. We just celebrated our 75th anniversary, and we did a beautiful documentary about who has been in that theater. And, you know, I don't know if you feel this way. When you walk into a theater, you can feel the buzz in the air. I mean, some theaters are considered dead spaces, and others are considered just electric, and ours is one of those electric ones. And I do think that goes through there, and the energy of all the great performances are in the air of the theater. It's wonderful. And we're beginning to season, as they say, the new theater, too. And it was great to do that, sort of inaugurating that with Jimmy in his white suit and all those wonderful actors from Mann in the Tropics.
While we were doing Barbara Walters, I remember I was at some luncheon, and she was giving some talk, and she said, "Women, I want you to know something. You can't have it all. You can have two of the three."
Well, what are those,
please? Career, children, husband.
Oh, my.
You can't do justice to all three. Well, Not true, right?
I'm a blessed woman.
Yeah.
I'm right
you have
now,
married
as I knock wood, 3 out of 3. I have a fantastic son and a wonderful husband.
Is your husband in the biz?
No, his name is Gary Mailman, and he is a lawyer. And it's so incredibly supportive, and he thinks that what we do is just magic, and that's lovely.
That is lovely.
It's lovely to come home to, I must tell you. And my son is thriving, so
Well, this has been lovely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Emily Mann, and thank you for joining us. On behalf of the League of Professional Theater Women, I'm Linda Weiner, and this has been Women in Theater.